We have quite a resident patch artist. She's been with us for a number of years and a personal friend of mine. You may have seen her in her studio over at East Quay in Watchet. I'd like to welcome Georgina Towler.
Okay, hello. So I have entitled my talk for this evening, Love, Death and Elbow Room. And hopefully by the end you'll realise why I've called it that. For those of you who don't already know my work, fundamentally it's about all those kind of big untouchable things, so light, colour and space. The things you can't hold on to because they're constantly changing, which is ironic really, because in the summer of 2022 I actually had an exhibition at Ace Arts in Somerton which I entitled Stop. I was so keen to try and slow people down and encourage them to kind of catch those fleeting moments of life. I was basically saying, stop, here's a moment, you've missed it, and I want you to look at it again. The thing is, of course, that that's completely impossible, because moments never stand still, and neither do we. So thinking about it now, a more accurate title for the exhibition might have been, Stop. Oh, God, now it's moving. So you need to stop again. Wait, hang on a minute. I want you to look over there. Hang on. Oh, quite quick. Look. Never mind. But I decided that might have been a little bit lengthy for the poster, and we wouldn't really have been able to fit it on. But essentially, what I'm saying is that even when we stop, we're still moving through time. So this idea of kind of fixing these ever-shifting qualities within a painting is actually a really big contradiction. I used to feel really uneasy about contradictions. I used to think that if I was allowing myself to contradict myself, I didn't know what I thought. And that's the fear, isn't it? We're conditioned to think that if we don't know, we're losing ourselves. And we'll lose our power because we don't know what seat we're in. But as Rebecca Solnit so eloquently puts it, even the word lost has two disparate meanings. Losing things is about the familiar falling away, and getting lost is about the unfamiliar appearing. So what I'm beginning to understand is that considering contradictions and feeling comfortable in places of uncertainty is actually a key part of my practice. Because in contradicting yourself, you're questioning yourself, and you're saying, this world is constantly moving, and I'm moving too. And there's going to be opposites, and there's going to be edges, and there's going to be gaps in between. So I could have called this talk Power, Loss, and the in-between. But naturally, I've gone for the slightly more ambiguous version, Love, Death, and Elbow Room. You see, the thing is, for the past 10 years, whilst I've been trying to consider these big subjects of colour and light and space, I've been overlooking an even bigger, even more ambiguous subject at the root of my practice. I've often talked about my practice being this relationship with the world and trying to capture that relationship. But what I haven't spoken about is that thing that's at the heart of a relationship, love. So what I want to ask this evening is, how can we visually communicate all these transient metaphysical ideas through this traditionally still medium of paint? Can you feel the time passing when you look at the work? Can you see that accumulation of all the artist's emotions? Can you objectify all that time, all that experience, all those truthful elements of a relationship being built, all that love? Now, around this time last year, I made this painting. And it's often the way, I find, that paintings that kind of come to you impulsively out of some kind of urge harness a power to hold the space. Although this piece doesn't speak to me of a particular place, and I can't really pinpoint a singular experience that led to its creation, what I can tell you is that it lived with me through a really difficult time. not only in my head, but in the studio as well. Shortly after I made this painting, Nana was taken into hospital, and simultaneously I was coming to realise that the relationship I was in was breaking down. As difficult times often can be in retrospect, this period is pretty hard and kind of hazy and difficult to articulate. But what I do know is that when I think back to that time, it's this piece in my head that I see. It was this piece that kind of kept my mind optimistic during the uncertainty. And I think I knew that it had the power to kind of push my work into a new direction. A couple of months later, in the January of this year, I was lucky enough to see the Monet Mitchell exhibition at the Louis Vuitton Foundation in Paris. And I know that some of you will have heard me speak about this exhibition before, but I really would go as far to say that it's one of the most powerful exhibitions I've ever seen, and I have seen quite a few exhibitions. The visual language of these works was so connected, it bridged the gap of two separate lifetimes. Monet and Mitchell's actual lives slipped past one another, but this exhibition meant that they could live together through their work. The paintings connected them across the barriers of time. Although they never met, this exhibition enlisted the viewer to be the point of connection between these two extraordinary painters' lives. For the 2 hours or more I spent in the space, I was held in the in-between, and you could feel that power in the room. I left this exhibition feeling as though painting was going to immortalize me. Death didn't seem so permanent after all. And considering how unwell Nana was at the time, it's hardly surprising really that my brain was searching for hope. In those days of seeing Nana so unwell and so trapped, it was like she was stuck in between life and death. I couldn't quite work it out in my head. She still had a life, essentially, in that moment, but in reality, she didn't. You see, we always talk about life and death being these two finite things, and I kind of think, like anything, they're not. You can have a life and be trapped, or maybe you can have death and be free. I don't know, but all I know is that in those days when I saw Nana being so unwell, I remember the overall feeling it left me with when I walked down those hospital stairs was how much power I had and how alive I was. It was so important to me in those moments to reflect on that feeling and in a weird way kind of cherish it, like I was cherishing her. I desperately wanted to hold on to the feeling of being alive. I returned to the studio that January with a new sense of power. I was excited to continue with a body of work that had started a whole year earlier. I'd been working on a series of drawings which tracked the changes in a particular hedgerow throughout the 12-month period. I'd already completed the first two paintings, which were called Crux and Vigour, and these three canvases were going to continue the journey through time. The drawings, of course, track the changes within the environment and the trees themselves, the changes in colour, the changes in light, and the changes in weather. So naturally, the paintings would capture the essence of the changing lives of those trees. But as painting always does, it tracks the life of the painter too. These paintings were not only about those trees in all those moments, but inevitably about me in all those moments too. And every moment I would go on to live between the making of the drawings and the putting of paint onto the canvas. These works went on to track my life through the last weeks of a relationship, the last weeks of my 20s, and the last weeks of Nana's life. As I usually do, when things are all going a bit to shit, I hang on to the painting. And that and countless episodes of Downton Abbey. And it always works. There's never really been a situation in my life that I haven't been able to paint my way out of. In fact, I'm proud to say that my relationship with my art practice has been my most enduring to date. Over the 30 years, we've had our ups and downs, but it always seems to pull it out the bag. Just when I'm wondering what the hell is the point in all of it, the painting comes to you and tells you you're going to be okay. So during these weeks, understandably, I was thinking a lot about all the things we carry in our head when we're out there in the world. And it led to the creation of my first film piece, which I called It's Looking Right Back at You. I exhibited the piece here at Hatch as part of our Reflections and Shadows exhibition in March. It features me taking a painting for a walk. I was trying to capture this idea that the moment of the present is fuzzy, and within it we hold our reflections for the future and our shadows of the past, and our reflections of the past and our shadows of the future. So basically I was saying that our experience of the world is hazy. Conceptually, I feel like there's still a lot to resolve in this piece. But what it taught me was, I like the way the visual language allowed time barriers to be crossed in the Monet Mitchell exhibition. Visual language can also allow you to pull your work across mediums. This was a film, but at the same time, it was a painting. It had a conversation between the two. And this conversation did a really good job of capturing all those ambiguous subject matters that I'm interested in. It was a poignant moment in my life to be considering how we visualise the past and the future. My lovely Nana passed away on the 31st of March during the last weekend of our Hatch exhibition. And as day-to-day life continued, so did the painting. About a month later, during the same week as Nana's funeral, I also made the final marks on the last painting of the tree series, Solace. At the time, I kept looking at this prominent vertical visual language going on in these works and saying, what am I doing here? Am I painting myself into a cage, building walls, or creating barriers for myself? But then there's two ways of looking at these forms. You could call them barriers, or you could call them pillars. Change the word, and you change the meaning. It's no longer about restriction, but it's about power and strength. You see, whilst there was a huge sadness in my world during the creation of these paintings, I wasn't going to the paintings seeking sadness. I was going to the paintings and seeking hope. And that's what the paintings gave back to me. When you look at these paintings, they're not about loss, they're about finding strength in change, looking to the distance and trusting in the unknown. Which brings me to the painting in question, the painting hanging in the barn today, which is called We're All Just Floating in the Grass Between the Future and the Past. There's no such thing as perpetual summer, because love, it's a lot about elbow room. This piece expands on my drawings of the new summer light in the Porlock Marshes this May. The birth of this painting was about power and strength and challenge. There was a kind of urgency in me to do it. I'd been feeling this sort of envy since seeing those monumental Joan Mitchell paintings back in the January and realised I needed to make it happen. I was the only person that could make this painting live. It was a relief to make those first marks, although at the same time I immediately realised the power that's required to make on this scale. Scaling up is actually really difficult, because just because the canvas is big, it doesn't automatically mean that the painting is going to have power. You've got to bring the power to it. So it's a very emotional thing. You can't just paint like you do on a small scale. A brush mark, which is just a flick of a wrist on a small canvas, is a whole monster movement, which is really easy to kill. So you're the only one, and you've got to bring the energy to it. I really do think that I pushed the power of Nana's death into this painting. I'm sure as many of you have experienced that when you're sitting with someone as they're reflecting on their life in those last few days, it makes you question everything. For some people, it gives them the power to quit their jobs or end relationships, start new lives or have children. And for me, I think it made me make this painting. I worked on this piece nearly every day for about 3 months this summer. So at this point, you're probably wondering why the hell I decided to cut it up.
Yeah.
Earlier in the year, we'd had an exhibition at the galleries at East Quay by an artist called Peter Liversidge. I was particularly taken by his postal works, which you can see here. For those of you who didn't see the show, essentially, these items arrived in the post throughout the exhibition and were added to the shelves, and so there was this element of growth that went on. Around the same time, we'd also been having the conversation about the Death and Microwaves exhibition here at Hatch. And I really liked the idea of death and loss being the opposite to the growth of Peter's work. I wanted to create something which decayed throughout the show, a painting that no longer existed at the end of the exhibition. Now, initially, I'd planned to make a whole new painting for this purpose. And then I realised there was a really important conversation to be had about honesty. This performance of cutting needed to mean something. And if it was going to mean something, I needed to have a real relationship with the painting that I was going to cut. And as the weeks in the studio passed, I realised that it needed to be this painting. Strangely, it was probably around the time that I finished the painting, towards the end of August, that I actually made the firm decision in my head to cut the painting up. And I have to say, since then, it's been totally liberating. In the past couple of months, it's allowed me a whole new freedom in my practice, and I've quite literally started cutting up all of my work. These pieces are the accumulation of works that span the last couple of years, cut and spliced together again. Some of them are from previously exhibited works. Others are from paintings that I intended to become installations that never came to fruition. Some of the things I'd worked on and then put away, they all started out as one thing, but they found their resolve in another. What I really like about these works is that they're not neat and tidy. There's not a nice linear timeline. Like life, they're messy. The paintings have conversations across time. It's the opposite of packing up the past. It's about allowing the past to move with me. In cutting up the paintings, I'm saying, these pieces existed then, and they had that form. Then they moved into something else, and now they're this. Time has fragmented them and split them up. Different points in time have got muddled. Visually, things are mixing. But they still all happened, and that's okay. They are still here with me, but I don't need to hold on to them in their old forms, and I can be okay with that. I'm cutting up something that was once my best bit of painting that day, or that week, but that's okay, because it's not the best bit of painting I'm still to do. The moment we had together still happened, but now I'm giving me and it the power by letting that go. It seems to me, for things to live forever, they need to keep moving through time. They need to change. They need to reach out to the horizon and welcome the new. Now, of course, in the life of a human being, if you're going to move through time, you're inevitably going to die. So perhaps our immortality lives in our death.
Yeah.
But that's not to say it doesn't hurt. The day I hung the painting here in the barn, the reality of what I was about to do hit home. And it did. It made me feel quite sick. But, I'd made the decision, and accepting that feeling was part of the work. Interestingly, when I made the first cut, it actually felt okay. But of course, I was still in control at that point. And it was in the handing over of the scissors that the power shifted. Watching my friends making the first cuts was way more unsettling than I thought it would be. in actually witnessing the motion, I felt pretty vulnerable. But what I realised is that in the act of cutting, I found a new connection. It was a way of bridging the gap between me and you. It helps us both to meet, and it helps us both to feel. And that's what art has the power to do. It has the power to truly make us feel. And whatever that is that we feel, whatever emotion that is that it holds, it's a really valuable thing. Because when you feel, that's when you know you're alive. And in the same way that when I held Nana's hand after she died, witnessing the reality of her death, in a kind of way, helped me to be free. And when I see the painting now, like this, it's kind of the same. You see, in the loss of Nana, I found a new power. Her death didn't mean her love had been lost. It just changed, like we all do. She was moving, and I was moving too. Life had moved, and I was moving with it. And in cutting this painting, I'm welcoming the change, and I'm welcoming the love. I'm finding contentment in the unknown. The physicality of the painting falls away, its shadows are born, and its absence becomes its presence. A few weeks ago, I was out on the beach with Richard, and we're sitting on a rock, and as we get out our sketchbooks, he wriggles himself and moves a little bit further away from me. And naturally, I make some kind of facial expression that says, "Oh, don't you want to sit next to me anymore?" To which he responds, "Don't worry, it's not that I don't want to be close to you, it's just that I need a little bit of elbow room." And I thought, that's it, isn't it? Love sits in the space we can't hold. It fills the gaps in between. It transports us across space and time, beyond life and beyond death. It moves and it shifts. And as you change, the love changes too. You've got the freedom to wriggle, you've got the freedom to move, you've got the freedom to grow. Most importantly, you've got the freedom to fall. Because when we love, we step over into the unknown. But we're not lost because we're held within that love. We're held within the elbow room. Yeah, so to a few people, I had initially mentioned that the idea behind the cutting piece would be that people could cut a piece of the painting and take it home with them. And then, as I was thinking about it more, I realised that added a whole kind of new value to the work itself, and in two ways. So one, it then became this kind of potential commercial value of like, you've cut off a piece of painting and you've got it. And I wasn't sure how I felt about that, what that then said about the piece itself. But also, more importantly, I thought that if you're thinking about the cutting of what you're going to get, you're not necessarily thinking about the loss of the painting, you're thinking about your gain. And I wanted people to be cutting it and feeling some kind of sense of loss.
I love it.
Yeah. I know. What can I say?
I know. You really love it, though. You all love it. Really.
Just give me a real sense of loss, though, you know?
Yeah.
You know, I feel quite sad, you know what I mean? And she told me about, since it was really deep and personal to you, yeah? You talk about cutting it, and then you said the word splicing, which I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah.
It's also the sense of like you're trying to heal something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Quite nice to both bring it together, but the fact is there's still a possibility that it might come together.
Yeah. Yeah, I do.
You gave a lot, like, you know what I mean? I find it quite powerful.
Oh, thank you.
Just the process of the cutting, and then I think it took a lot of guts to do that, because I'd paint myself, you know, and the idea of destroy the painting or cut the painting, yeah? It's kind of like, some people like to think of a sacrilege, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why do it?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the frustration as well. I've spent all this time on it, and then it is about ultimate sacrifice.
Yeah.
You know, suicide.
I think And also it's kind of a comment on that time, because, you know, you spend all this time doing something and then ultimately you don't necessarily end up with an object or a thing at the end of that. But all the experiences you've had in that time are probably the valuable thing. So if you can then, I suppose, if you can think, but the cutting has happened, but then what I've gained in that experience is just something that I can't hold on to. Quite like that. Yeah, yeah, it's the process that, yeah. Yeah.
I just think in the process of involving your friends,
Yeah.
makes it a kind of like they're involved with your sort of loss of
Yeah.
and your creation, and I don't know, some sort of group thing.
Yeah.
That part of holding.
Well, I think it's interesting because it felt really different watching like my group of friends and people cutting it than it has watching members of the public cut it. Because in my head, when I was watching people I know cut it, there's this question of like, is that saying something about our relationship? Like, is the way Alicia's cutting the painting saying something about how she feels about me, as opposed to the way that Alexis cut the painting, which would be saying something quite different. So I don't know whether, like,
You're getting too deep.
yeah, you know. So I think, whereas when it's someone that I don't know, like we haven't got a relationship yet, so it's an open book, you know. What are you
going to do with the bits that were cut at the end?
Yeah, so I don't know. I haven't decided, but I think that it would be nice for them to have some other life. So yeah, there's the potential that they could get stitched or joined into something else or made into other pieces of work. I don't know, yeah. But I would quite like it if they did, yeah, have some other form. But I think also it's quite interesting that once they've fallen onto the floor, people, you know, which is fine, but there's like footprints on them and people have, and it's interesting that once they're no longer hung like that, then suddenly they don't seem to have the same value. In that it's interesting that someone it thinks it's okay to step on a painting once it's on the floor, but if it's on the wall, you wouldn't, you know. But I quite like that. I quite like that questioning around it.
Yeah, I think it's a really great idea and a great piece of work. It's incredibly thought-provoking.
Thank you,
So,
Tina.
congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay. For the wire. The ink on my cord.